Welcome back to Bible Talks on WBCM Radio for another deep dive into the book of Genesis. We're picking up with Genesis 27,
Oh, yeah.
a chapter that's just bursting with drama and intrigue.
You're not kidding. It's like something out of a soap opera. We've got family secrets and deception and a power struggle that will have repercussions for generations to come.
Okay, so for our listeners who might need a quick refresher, can you set the scene for us? Where are we in the Genesis narrative, and who are the key players in this chapter?
We're at a pivotal moment in the lives of Isaac and his twin sons, Jacob and Esau.
Okay.
Isaac, now old and blind, is preparing to bestow his patriarchal blessing on his eldest son, Esau. But as we know, things rarely go according to plan in the world of Genesis.
That's putting it mildly. The blessing itself seems to be a major point of tension here.
Right.
Can you unpack that a little? What's the significance of this blessing, and why is everyone so fixated on it?
It wasn't just a sentimental well-wish.
Right.
In those times, the patriarchal blessing carried immense weight. It was a pronouncement of favor, a transfer of spiritual authority, and often a prediction of the recipient's future. It had real-world implications for inheritance leadership and even the destiny of entire nations.
Wow, that's heavy stuff.
Yeah.
So Isaac intends to bless Esau, his firstborn. But that's not quite how things play out, right? Enter Rebekah, the mastermind behind a rather audacious scheme.
Right. Rebekah overhears Isaac's plan and, driven by her favoritism for Jacob, decides to take matters into her own hands. And let me tell you, she doesn't mess around.
Yeah.
This woman is a force to be reckoned with.
I'm already picturing her as some kind of biblical Olivia Pope strategizing and manipulating events from behind the scenes.
That's not a bad comparison.
Right.
She quickly hatches a plan to trick Isaac into blessing Jacob instead, utilizing her knowledge of Isaac's blindness and his fondness for Esau's wild game.
Speaking of Jacob, he seems a bit hesitant about this whole deception, right?
Yeah.
He even expresses concern about the potential consequences of tricking his father.
He does. Jacob, unlike his mother, seems to grapple with the moral implications of the plan. He says to Rebekah, "My father may feel me, and I will seem to him as a deceiver and bring a curse upon myself and not a blessing."
Wow.
He's clearly wrestling with his conscience.
That's an interesting observation. It paints a more complex picture of Jacob than just the scheming, conniving character he's sometimes portrayed as.
Right.
He seems to understand the gravity of what they're about to do.
Absolutely. And Rebekah, in her determination, basically says, "Don't worry, honey, I'll take the heat if things go south."
Wow.
She even invokes a curse on herself, which speaks volumes about her fierce love for Jacob and her willingness to go to any lengths to secure his future.
Talk about a protective mother. So walk us through the details of this elaborate ruse.
Okay.
How does Rebekah manage to pull off this deception?
She starts by instructing Jacob to fetch 2 young goats from the flock. Now, goats were a staple food in those times, but Rebekah wasn't just whipping up any old meal.
Right.
She was preparing a culinary masterpiece, something so irresistible that it would appeal to Isaac's senses and make him believe he was truly feasting with Esau.
This is where those sensory details really come into play, right? Isaac's blindness heightens his other senses, particularly his sense of smell and touch.
Precisely. Rebekah knows this, and she uses it to her advantage. She dresses Jacob in Esau's clothes, likely imbued with the scent of the hunt, and covers his hands and neck with the skins of the young goats to mimic Esau's hairiness. It's a multisensory illusion designed to completely fool Isaac.
Wow. It's almost Shakespearean in its level of intrigue and deception.
It is.
But even with all this, Isaac still has his doubts.
Right?
He questions Jacob's unusually quick return from hunting, and even asks to touch him.
Yes. There's this incredible moment of tension where Isaac almost catches on. You can practically feel the suspense building as he reaches out to touch Jacob, probing for any inconsistencies that might betray the deception. It's a close call.
But Jacob, coached by his mother, manages to deflect Isaac's suspicions. He concocts a story about God granting him success in the hunt, further solidifying the illusion that he is indeed Esau.
And it works.
Wow.
Despite his initial hesitation, Isaac is convinced. He leans and inhales that savory aroma from Jacob's clothes and utters those fateful words, "Come near and kiss me, my son."
Oh, wow.
It's a moment fraught with significance because it marks the point of no return.
This is where the weight of the blessing really hits home. It's not just a casual gesture. It's a powerful pronouncement that will shape Jacob's destiny.
Right.
Do you want to walk us through some of the key elements of that blessing? What exactly does Isaac bestow upon Jacob?
He begins by invoking the blessings of the earth, saying, "May God give you of heaven's dew and of earth's richness, an abundance of grain and new wine."
Okay.
This signifies material prosperity and a land flowing with abundance, aligning with the covenant promises made to Abraham and his descendants.
It's interesting that the blessing is framed in terms of God's provision rather than just Isaac's personal wishes.
Right.
It suggests that this isn't merely a family affair, it has cosmic implications.
Exactly. It elevates the blessing beyond a simple inheritance and connects it to God's overarching plan for his chosen people. But it doesn't end there.
Hmm.
Isaac continues, stating, "May nations serve you and peoples bow down to you. Be lord over your brothers, and may the sons of your mother bow down to you. May those who curse you be cursed, and those who bless you be blessed."
That's a pretty powerful declaration. It's not just about material wealth, it's about dominion, authority, and a kind of spiritual leadership that extends beyond Jacob's immediate family.
Right. And this is where we start to see the seeds of future conflict being sown. The blessing hints at a power dynamic between Jacob and his brother Esau that will play out in the chapters to come.
It seems like this blessing sets the stage for a pretty dramatic shift in the family dynamic.
Yeah.
But before we dive into the fallout, I'm curious about something. We've talked about the significance of the blessing from Isaac's perspective.
Right.
But what about Jacob? How does he receive this unexpected turn of events?
That's a great question. The text doesn't explicitly delve into Jacob's inner thoughts at this precise moment. However, we can glean some insights from his actions and his later interactions with Esau.
What do you make of his silence? He doesn't seem to express any overt joy or gratitude towards his mother for orchestrating this whole thing. Is it possible he's feeling a bit conflicted, even guilty?
It's certainly possible. Remember, Jacob initially voiced his concerns about deceiving his father, acknowledging the potential for a curse. Perhaps now, having received the blessing under false pretenses, those anxieties resurface. Or maybe he's simply overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of what's just transpired.
And just as Jacob is processing this monumental shift in his life, Esau walks in totally oblivious to what's just gone down. Talk about awkward timing.
Right. Esau returns from the hunt, proud of his accomplishment and eager to receive his father's blessing. He even prepares a delicious meal, just like Jacob did, presenting it to Isaac with a sense of filial duty.
But when Isaac asks, "Who are you?" Esau's response, "I am your son, your firstborn Esau," shatters the illusion and sends shockwaves through the old patriarch. I can't even imagine what must have been going through Isaac's mind at that moment.
The text tells us that Isaac trembled violently upon realizing the deception.
Wow.
He had been tricked, manipulated by his own wife and son. The weight of the blessing, the sanctity of his patriarchal authority, all came crashing down in that instant.
And for Esau, it must have felt like a devastating betrayal. First by his brother, who usurped his birthright, and then by his father, who, despite the deception, confirmed the blessing on Jacob.
Esau's reaction is raw and visceral.
Yeah.
He cries out with a very great and bitter cry, pleading with his father. "Bless me too, my father."
Wow.
His anguish is palpable, and it's hard not to feel sympathy for him in this moment.
So what happens next? Can Isaac undo what's been done? Can he somehow retract the blessing he's already given to Jacob?
Unfortunately for Esau, no. Isaac explains that he cannot revoke the blessing. He declares, "I have made him your master, and I have made all his relatives his servants, and I have sustained him with grain and new wine. So what can I possibly do for you, my son?"
It's interesting that Isaac phrases it as, "I have made him your master." It's as if he's acknowledging a power beyond his own, a sense that this event has been somehow ordained or set in motion by a higher authority.
That's a really insightful observation. It hints at the idea of divine providence, the notion that God is working behind the scenes, even in the midst of human fallibility and deception.
But even though he can't undo the blessing given to Jacob, Isaac doesn't leave Esau completely empty-handed, does he?
No, he doesn't. Despite the turmoil and the irreversible nature of the situation, Isaac offers Esau a blessing as well,
Okay.
albeit one that stands in stark contrast to the blessing bestowed upon Jacob.
What's the nature of this second blessing? How does it differ from what Jacob received?
Isaac's blessing for Esau is less about material abundance and dominion and more about struggle, conflict, and a life lived on the edges. He says, "Your dwelling will be away from the earth's richness, away from the dew of heaven above. You will live by the sword, and you will serve your brother. But when you grow restless, you will throw his yoke from off your neck."
Wow, that's a pretty stark contrast. Jacob gets abundance and dominion, while Esau gets hardship and subjugation, at least for a time.
Right.
It seems to foreshadow a future marked by tension and rivalry between the brothers.
Absolutely. And that tension is immediately apparent in Esau's response.
Yeah.
Consumed by bitterness and resentment, he views to kill Jacob after their father's death.
Wow.
This isn't just sibling rivalry, it's a declaration of vengeance fueled by a sense of injustice and a deep-seated wound that will fester for years to come.
So the chapter ends on this rather ominous note with the threat of fratricide hanging over the family.
Yeah.
It's a stark reminder that even within a family chosen by God, human passions and the consequences of our choices can lead to darkness and division.
It's a powerful and unsettling reminder that the biblical narrative isn't always neat and tidy. It grapples with the complexities of human nature,
Right.
the messiness of relationships, and the enduring consequences of sin, even within the context of God's overarching plan.
And it leaves us with some really challenging questions.
Right.
How do we reconcile Rebekah's deception and Jacob's complicity with the idea that they are part of God's chosen lineage?
Right.
How do we make sense of the contrasting blessings, and what do they tell us about God's purposes for Jacob and Esau?
These are questions that have been pondered by theologians and lay people alike for centuries, and they're questions that we'll continue to explore as we delve deeper into the book of Genesis and witness how the events of this chapter ripple outward, shaping the destinies of not just Jacob and Esau, but their descendants for generations to come.
Speaking of exploring further, I think we need to take a quick break and give our listeners a chance to process all this before we move on. So we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive into Genesis 27. WBCM. From Rebekah's elaborate scheme to the contrasting blessings bestowed upon Jacob and Esau, this chapter is a roller coaster of emotions and theological implications.
It really is. And I think one of the most striking takeaways for me is the sheer complexity of these characters.
Yeah.
They're not simple heroes or villains. They're deeply human, driven by a mix of motivations, love, ambition, fear, even desperation.
You're right. It's not easy to neatly categorize their actions as purely good or bad. Take Rebekah, for instance. Her fierce love for Jacob leads her to deceive her husband and manipulate a situation that has far-reaching consequences.
Exactly. Her actions raise all sorts of questions about the boundaries of maternal love, the justification of deception, and the potential for unintended consequences.
Right.
But at the same time, you can sense her deep-seated belief that she's acting in accordance with God's will, that Jacob is the rightful heir to the blessing.
It's almost as if she sees herself as a co-conspirator with God intervening in human affairs to ensure that his plan unfolds according to her understanding.
That's a fascinating way to put it. And it speaks to a larger theme that we see throughout the Bible, the interplay between human choice and divine sovereignty. How much agency do we have in shaping our destinies, and to what extent is God orchestrating events from behind the scenes?
Those are big questions.
Yeah.
And Genesis 27 doesn't offer any easy answers. But it does invite us to wrestle with these complexities, to consider the multifaceted nature of faith and the often messy reality of human experience.
It also challenges us to think about the nature of blessings. Are they fixed and unchangeable, predetermined from birth? Or can they be influenced by human actions, even those that seem morally ambiguous?
And what about the contrasting blessings themselves? Does this suggest that Esau is somehow less favored by God, destined for a life of hardship, while Jacob enjoys abundance and dominion?
That's a common misinterpretation. It's important to remember that God's love and favor are not limited or conditional. Esau, despite not receiving the same blessing as Jacob, is still loved by God and ultimately finds his own path to fulfillment.
It's a reminder that God works in mysterious ways.
Yeah.
And his plans often unfold in ways that we can't fully comprehend.
And it's also a reminder that the blessings we receive may not always align with our expectations or desires. Sometimes God's blessings come disguised as challenges, pushing us to grow, to learn, and to discover our true potential.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Genesis 27, I think the key takeaway is this. It's a chapter that invites us to embrace the complexities, to grapple with the tough questions, and to trust that even in the midst of human fallibility and messy situations, God is still working out his purposes.
I couldn't agree more. It's a story that resonates across centuries, reminding us that faith is not about simple answers or easy solutions, but about a journey of discovery, growth, and ultimately surrender to a God whose ways are higher than our own.
It's a journey we're all on together, and we're so glad you've joined us for this leg of it. We'd love to hear your thoughts on Genesis 27.
Yes.
What stood out to you? What questions are you wrestling with? Share your insights in the comments.
And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into Scripture.
Until next time, keep seeking, keep questioning, and keep diving deep into the Word.